Okay, this should be a brief update on the communication satellites I've been putting up. I extended the launch script. Previously, I was parsing the name of the ship to get the phase offset, so it was C03 and then a phase offset. And now we are parsing more things. So we can see here that I have more satellites out. So now it's the phase offset followed by the period in sidereal days. So /1 gets us our synchronous orbit. And we can now add more parameters off after that, which I won't go into right now. They're basically having to do with inclination and eccentricity and the location of the perhaps I was trying to set this up generically so that I could launch some polar satellites and get some long distance stuff. And then I realized in this save, the biggest communication dish that I have set up has a range of 5 million meters. So if I want to have consistent radio coverage out to MUN without counting on direct lines from Kerbal, I need to put up several rings of satellites. So that's what I started doing. You notice I have turned off the alternate communications. The only node I have for the CurbNet is now the launch station. And we have the inner orbit, which had 5 later. Ooh, I've got a co-pilot. Hold on, let me grab her. Say hi, Lucy. So the inner ring is the same orbit that I set up last time, but instead of 5 satellites, I put 8 in to get him closer. What I wanted was to have decent coverage, and it turns out that while you can get coverage from the 5, and they do connect with each other, it's at a low bandwidth. So I put up 8, and then I realized that you're going to get that low bandwidth no matter what you do. So we're not going to get 100%. She just wanted to say hi. So I got the first ring up, and there was 8, and I put up the second ring, and I thought, well, let's keep them close enough so that this distance from one satellite to the next, I can keep the radio going, and then we'll have the links from 1 to 2. This orbit is at a 2 sidereal day period. And then the next orbit out, it made sense to do it with 4 sidereal day periods. And I am launching 24, I think 24. Hold on. I have to do this in a spreadsheet now. No, this is a ring of 15. Okay. So the ring is 8, then 12, then 15. And the next ring out would be at the distance of MUN. So instead of doing my current satellites, what I'll do is eventually I will put a modified script out so that instead of forming off of, for instance, C03, 300 /2, 270 /2, and so on, these are all looking at this guy right here. And they're saying, I want to maintain my position in orbit relative to him. Well, instead, for this ring, we will maintain our offset from MUN. And that will require some code changes. So we're not doing that yet. We don't need to do it in a hurry because once I get this ring done, we can put satellites in orbit around MUN and they will always connect through. So that will give us our connectivity to MUN. Anyway, so let's launch the next satellite in orbit here. We got through 168 degrees. So the name here is just the same convention as before, C/03, getting us the scripts. 168/4, saying this is at 168 degrees off from the lead, and it's at 4 sidereal day period. And so the next one is going to be another 15th of the way around, so 24 degrees from him. It's going to be 192. Let's go ahead and launch that. Tick, 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 tick. first launch since we started KSP. It's at 192/4. Verifying that on the spreadsheet. Yep. When you're launching this many satellites and the satellite name controls where it goes, you kind of have to organize it a bit. So all I need to do is set the name and hit launch, and I can actually go off and do other things while this is going. Things like drink coffee and look at code. So some initial messages confirming our configuration. I will bring this up here. So the initial auto-stager message needs to be tweaked. It's computing its mission elapsed time, but T0 hasn't been set yet. This really is a message I'm only interested in looking at when I reboot, not the first boot. So this says I am me, C0319224, and then I'm going to print out what I decoded. I said, oh, this is a satellite in constellation position, and here's the satellite I'm going to be forming from, and my offset is 192 degrees. That's great. Okay, so now we do a normal launch. Because the scripting has now been updated to do eccentric orbits where the periapsis is at a specific spot, we no longer launch to our final altitude directly. We're going to launch to an 80-kilometer orbit, and we're going to get solid in that orbit, and then we're going to transition our apoapsis up to our target apoapsis. And then we are going to very carefully get ourselves up to that target and correct our periapsis when we're done. Now, for this orbit, it's nearly circular, so correcting the periapsis will be kind of a one-step thing, circularize, unless I have done it very badly. And from here on, we can watch from the map view. You'll see the curb net as it is growing. If you get in close, you see just the orbits of the satellites. Let's turn those off. So we don't see the orbits of the satellites, but we will still see the curb net connections. So you see where all the relays are. The green lines are within range, and the red lines are a potential radio contact which is not within range. And the range is based on the rated range of both ends. So you'll notice, for instance, that from Kerbal Science Center here, we can do a direct connect very far. These guys have a pair of 5 million or 5M rated dishes on them. That's my biggest dish, which means we can talk from here to here, but we can't talk from here to here. So we have to set up this kind of a grid pattern. It's kind of a mandala. And once we get to where we're going to do some time zooming, you'll notice that each ring is going to be orbiting at a different speed, which is why they have to be close enough so that this guy will maintain connection to one of these two at all times. And as he moves around, he will have connection to this guy, then establish connection down here, and so on. Or the other way, actually. So we can actually show... I guess we don't have vessel links at the moment. Yeah, we won't have vessel links until we light up our antennas on this ship. We extend our... There it is. We should have extended our antennas when we were done circularizing. So now we go to vessel links, and you can see that we have active links to the close-in satellites and too far to those guys. You'll see as we move around how we are maintaining links to many, many satellites. So because we are relaying through all these satellites and they're not right next to each other, the signal strength is going to drop off and we don't have a direct connection to KSC. KSC is completely upgraded, so it's kind of overkill for operations in this small area. I'm going to leave the signal strength display showing up there so we can watch what happens when we no longer have a direct link to KSC. Lower right, you can see that we used Lambert planning to move ourselves out to our destination. This means that we will be able to do this even if our target, if our lead element is in a inclined orbit that's eccentric, we will still be able to get into position on its same orbit at some offset of the mean anomaly. So after we manage to transition into this transfer orbit, we lighten, so which means we drop all but our final stage. So the upshot of this is that we are going to leave debris in this transfer orbit that goes between 80 kilometers and our orbit. And we do have to clean those up. If I had been smarter, I would have arranged for this transfer orbit to have a periapsis that was inside the atmosphere when I jettisoned those. So maybe wait until I'm halfway out and adjust so the periapsis is within the atmosphere, and then do the jettison, and then when I get out to the target position, we will do our adjustment to our final orbit. Now the final orbit for this guy will have apoapsis and periapsis both at, looks like about 8 million meters. The MUN is at 12 million. So you can see that our links we have fewer green links as we get out to where our position is because we haven't built the rest of the grid yet. If we look at the whole curb net, you can see how the inner ring is rotating faster. Of course, KSC is going around as well. The inner ring should be curvosynchronous, which means that it should always be the same satellites that have links to KSC. It was initially set up that way, and certainly the zero element is trying to maintain that period, but is not trying to maintain position over anybody in particular, which means I do expect the first ring to drift one way or the other over time. Also, each individual element is only maintaining its period. It's not maintaining its angle from its lead element, which means these elements may drift out of position. If any of them drift out of position so far that our radial links are getting weak, I can simply replace it by launching another satellite with that same name, and it will pick up the same assignment and try to slot into the same location. So these are single replaceable satellites. If I had built a multi-launch mission, that would have been really cool. We could go up and drop the first, drop the second, drop the third, and so on. But that means that replacing the third would still require this mission. So we will probably set up a multi-launch capable vessel and scripting for initial deployment, but we'll have to use this as our fallback for launching single satellites into a correction. Now, at this point, we have circularized, we've done our orbital adjustment. Orbital adjustment in this case means tweak our orbit so that the periapsis and apoapsis are what we want. And if we are outside that range, make it so that the current velocity is horizontal and the semi-major axis is correct so that our period is correct. And you can see here that our period is now correct within about 1 second. For this adjustment, we actually use RCS. So we are going to have to keep track of the monopropellant on our satellites as they correct their course. We have a lot of monopropellant, so these should be able to stay and actively maintain their position periodically for a very long time. And with 1 second of error, now this means that this is actually trying to actively control it, but it's got less thrust. The correction tries to tweak it. But even so, with only 1 second of error, you can look up here at our orbit information, and we are very, very close to circular. And the other thing to look at is what is our relative, our synodic period with respect to our lead element. This says that we would lap our lead element about every 800 years. So we are moving about half a degree out of position every year. So if we have a separation of 15 degrees, let's say I can tolerate 5 degrees, this means that this guy will be in position for about 5 years. That's fine. If we find ourselves having to maintain our constellations by repeatedly launching satellites, I may have to write some more complicated code that sees I'm getting out of position and sneaks me back toward position by adjusting the period appropriately. So anyway, that's what we've got. I've done it again. I hit N, I just tap N, and it's going to throw us one direction or the other. I'm not even sure which direction N goes. So N pushes us down. Not sure which. So I, J, K. It's going to be correcting these. So U, H. So I actually am adjusting the inclination when I do this. So we ended up with a significant inclination when we came up here. That's fine. Anyway, you fiddle around with that stuff and weird things happen. When we launch to a particular launch azimuth, and then we are using the same code from the rescue mission. I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Oops. So there, inclination has gone down. So we are probably about as low inclination as we can get. We are likely to be at the northern or southern extreme of the orbit right now. That's pretty good. I'm going to call this a stream, and nice and short. I will be filling out the rest of the Mandela, and probably the next stream I will be dealing with putting satellites in orbit around MUN so that we will have coverage for our MUN missions, which I hope to do sometime soon. See you next time.